Lamb, and I will be presenting the cases to the board for their review in today's public hearing. Members of the public at this time, please take a minute to turn off or otherwise silence your cell phones and other devices so that the board can consider cases without interruption. For these public hearings, the board reviews the correspondence submitted in support of and opposition to these cases. The board also reviews correspondence and recommendations from other government agencies in preparation for the hearings. In today's hearings, staff will present site plans, maps, photographs, and other documents that comprise the case record. At the conclusion of the staff presentation, the appellant will present his or her case to the board. After the appellant's presentation, the board will hear those wishing to speak in opposition to the case. Wishing to speak in support of the case. If the appeal then has opposition, the opposition would have an opportunity to present their testimony. After the opposition presents its testimony, the appellant will have a period for rebuttal. According to the BZA rules, the appellant has 5 minutes for presentation if no opposition is present. In contested cases, the BZA rules allow 10 minutes for each side to present testimony. Should the appellant wish to provide rebuttal testimony, the appellant should reserve some portion of the allotted 10 minutes. At the conclusion of each hearing, the board will deliberate and then vote on that case. The board is vested with the power to act on these cases under the provisions of the Metro Zoning Code, Section 1740-180. All section numbers that we refer to come from the Metro Zoning Code, which applies to the entire jurisdiction of the Metropolitan government. The Zoning Code was adopted by the Metro Council and became effective on January 1st, 1998. I will introduce the entire Zoning Code and make it a part of today's record. The Metro Code requires a record of these proceedings. Because BZA meetings are recorded for the Metro Nashville network, it is imperative that anyone addressing the board come forward, sit at the table, and speak into the microphone. All speakers should identify themselves by name and address before speaking to the board. The Metro Code requires 4 members of our 7-member board to establish quorum. The code also requires at least 4 affirmative votes to grant an appeal. In the event that 5 or more members are present, but the appeal fails to receive 4 affirmative votes, the case will remain on the board's agenda for the next 30 days. Applications that fail to receive 4 affirmative votes within 30 days of the public hearing shall be deemed denied by operation of law. Pursuant to board rules, an aggrieved party may appeal board decisions to Chancery or Circuit Court within 60 days of the entry of the BZA order. Additionally, as per the BZA rules, an aggrieved party may file a motion for rehearing by the BZA within 60 days of the original hearing date. After that time elapses, the board's decision becomes final and no further action can be taken. If your appeal is granted, you are required to obtain the permit for which you applied. A permit must be obtained within 2 years for a board approval to remain valid. It should also be noted that if false or misleading testimony is presented to the board, any board approval could be revoked at a later date by means of a show cause hearing before the BZA. Mr. Chairman, I submit that all cases have been filed in proper order, all appellants have been notified by certified mail, and all legal notice requirements have been fulfilled. I do have some preliminary announcements regarding deferrals and withdrawals for the board. Case 2019-212 has been deferred to September 5th. Case 2019-274 has been withdrawn. 2019-285 has been withdrawn. 2019-332 has been deferred to September 5th. And on the short-term rental docket, case 2019-118, I believe that's the first short-term rental case, has been deferred to September 5th. For members of the public, our board utilizes a consent agenda at each of its meetings. One board member reviews the record for each case prior to the hearing and identifies those cases which meet the criteria for the requested action by the appellant. If the reviewing board member determines that testimony in the case would not alter the material facts in any substantial way, then the case is recommended for the consent agenda for approval. We'll enter into the record those cases that have been so recommended. If anyone is here in opposition to a case that I call out, please be sure to raise your hand, make sure I see you. We'll pull it off the consent agenda and hear it in its regular order. Please note that on any of the sidewalk cases that are placed on the consent agenda, the applicant has agreed to planning's recommendation. Mr. Chairman, these are the cases that have been recommended for the consent agenda. Case 2019-128 involving property at 809 Horner Avenue. Is there anyone here in opposition to case 128? Seeing none, the next case is 2019-308 involving property at 11 Willow Street. Is there anyone here in opposition to case 308? Next case, 2019-324, involving property at 3570 Dickerson Pike. Is there anyone here in opposition to case 324? Next case, 2019-333, involving property at 5116 Raymond Lane. Is there anyone here in opposition to case 333? Seeing none, the last case for the consent agenda is case 2019-335, involving property at 2038 Elliott Avenue. Is there anyone here in opposition to case 335? Seeing none, to review, Mr. Chairman, the recommended consent agenda is 2019-128, 2019-308, 2019-324, 2019-333, and 2019-335.
I have a motion for the consent agenda. Is there a second? There's a motion, there's a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Consent agenda passes.
Members of the public, if your case was just approved on the consent agenda, you're free to go. Please give our staff until Monday to process all the necessary paperwork associated with your appeal, at which point you can come in and obtain your permit. At this point, we typically call on elected officials. I don't see any unless I've missed somebody, so we'll go ahead, absent any other announcements, Mr. Chairman, and proceed with the cases to be heard. The first case we'll hear today is case 2019-331, involving property at 236 Ashon Boulevard. Is the appellant here on case 331? I see somebody walking forward. So this is property at 236 Ashon Boulevard, requesting a variance from the side setback requirements in order to construct a pool house. Before you now is the zoning map showing the zoning of the property as R20. Area photography giving you a sense of the property and the surrounding area. This is the site plan as submitted by the applicant. And finally, photographs showing you the current conditions of the property as well as up and down the street. Is there anyone here in opposition to case 331? Seeing none, the appellant will have 5 minutes to make your desired presentation. Please remember to state your name and address.
You can also call it a pool house.
Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt. If you could turn your mic on. There's a.
Press the button.
Thank you.
Is that it? Usually I'm pretty loud. People hear me anyway. Nevertheless, this concrete pad was there. He wants to build a cabana, had begun the process of that when the stop work order was issued. What the problem that he has here, if you look at the lot, his lot is slanted. And so in order to put this cabana in where he wants to put it, it is going to encroach within the 10-foot rule that is the concern here. However, if he had to abide by that 10-foot rule, it would have to be placed almost at the back of his property. It would make it unusable and, quite frankly, just make it look bad across the board. We have some photos. I don't know if there's the ability to put them on the board or whatever it may be, but I can also pass these up and share them with everybody if I could. We can start them around this way, and there's multiple copies, so you can look, keep whatever you want to look at, whatever you want to do. And I got more gifts. some other photos that, again, I apologize, I didn't bring enough, but this gives you another sight line to look at. Finally, I'm going to show you a copy of I'm going to show you photos of the concrete pad that's in question that was there prior to his arrival. All he's seeking to do today, ladies and gentlemen, is just to add a cabana and a sort of a pool house cabana there next to or on this concrete pad. Again, not only am I his attorney, I'm his neighbor. I've been over to his house multiple times. Everything Mr. Molina does, he does with care. He does with forethought, and I've seen the plans, and quite frankly, as his neighbor, I'm very impressed with it. It'll be a real show place. It'll be a place for fellowship and all those things that neighbors are seeking. This lot is uniquely different. The physical characteristics of this property are different. The narrowness of it at the beginning causes us problems, and that's why we're seeking this variance. This is also a unique characteristic to this neighborhood. Most of their lots, including mine, are just straight level or straight lots, and you have straight boundary lines. His does not. There is no, he would suffer a hardship if not given this variance due to the fact that he would have to tear up this concrete pad that was already there and then move it to the back of his lot. And you can see it there on the photo where it would have to probably be. This is also a fenced-in lot, has a gate and all those things. Certainly he's not doing this for any financial gain. It's just for the betterment of his house and betterment for the neighborhood. There's no injury to his neighbors of any kind. The fence is the boundary line between him and his neighbor, and this will not cause any type of any kind of injury to his neighbors. There's certainly no harm to the public welfare to allow this variance. Again, we have a fence, we have a gate. As to the integrity of the master development plan, not only will this not impede upon that, it will only increase the integrity of our neighborhood. So he would like to have permission to finish this out and to make his lot a little more beautiful and to increase the overall appearance of our neighborhood. And
so is the 2-foot variance that's requested, is that that's the narrowest point, and is that at the point where the concrete pad is?
It is all, I think you should see it on the photo. I believe that is the case. I do not keep a copy of it.
And then, yeah, and so and I know that it looks like, according to the construction, part of this cabana, is the cabana going to be enclosed?
So on the cabana, some of it will be enclosed, but not with siding or anything like that. I think if there's an enclosure, it'll be with some kind of brick. Oh, it's going to be enclosed with brick? Okay, I'm sorry.
To match the house.
And it will match the house as well. Now, one thing I do want to add, this is not in any way, water is not going to be run to this cabana. It's not going to be used as any kind of residence or any kind of place where people can spend the night or anything like that.
Have you talked to the neighbor that's closest to this cabana, and what does that neighbor think about all this?
The neighbor that we have spoken to, let me take that back. The neighbor on the side that will affect the most, she had a recent loss of her husband. And so she really hasn't been, to my knowledge, very communicative with us one way or the other. Whoever made the complaint about it, we don't believe it was her. And so, in answer to your question, I have not spoken to her. I don't know if Mr. Molina has, other than greeting her and being a neighbor, I'm not sure he has.
And is your home on this?
My home would be, as the crow flies, about 200 yards away from his. I walk by his house every day with my dog.
Okay.
He is polite enough to allow me to come to his yard, and my dog plays in his pool almost on a nightly basis. He's a very good neighbor.
Okay.
Mr. Hoover, is this the photograph that shows where the setback is requested?
That is correct.
And where, I can't tell on the overhead, but if the fence is the property line, is that correct?
That is correct.
And how far away from that fence is the other neighbor? We've still got room on the other side.
If you look right there, it's hard to say, probably 12 to 15 feet.
On the
would
other
be
side
my
of the
guess.
fence? Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, as I'm clear, going back to this picture, the brick wall, that's not the back boundary line, right?
No, sir, that's the front boundary line.
This is the black fence, the black wrought iron fence is the back boundary
That's the side fence that runs, it runs back to the back of his yard.
The backside's 5 feet away from the fence, the front one is 2 feet. That's why it's not, you know what I mean? But here, point from the fence here is 5 feet, and that's 2 feet here. That's what we were finding. One side's 5 foot away.
We have, if the board wants to see it, we have a little bit of a drawing here that may give you some assistance as to kind of the dimensions of the
Yeah, no,
site.
that's in our packet. It was a little bit confusing, and I think you clarified it through the pictures, which is much appreciated, but we do have that in our packet that I think
Yes, sir.
most of us are looking at right now.
And why can't the cabana pool house be moved closer to the pool?
It abuts, I think it is going to be right there at the pool. I mean, there's a little bit of an area there between the pool and where the cabana will begin, but that's going to be more of a sitting area between the cabana and the pool, if that makes sense.
Maybe your drawing is more up to date than the one we have here, but we see a large area between the cabana and the pool.
It also, is what you have drawn pooled, is that just the water, or is that the concrete pad? You know, I mean, it's possible that if the pad's not on our drawing, then the pad may take up some of that space, maybe not, but I agree, it's confusing. Your drawing, the drawing you all submitted implies that there could be, there's space between the pool and where you're building.
Well, there is space between the pool, but that is the only open space around the pool. There's really no other places around the pool to sit outside. So you know, if you want to be in the sun and not under the cabana, then that is the space. If that is what you're asking me, that is the.
Kitchen doors there too, the kitchen door.
And there's a kitchen door
Yeah, to get out the house.
that exits the house right there as well. So.
Do you know what the dimensions of this cabana are? It looks pretty large, but
It's 36 by 20, well, half, 30, wow, how do you explain that? This right here is 24 by 12, and then the total length is 36.
Do they have this? Members of the board, do y'all have this in your packet by chance? I apologize, I do not have multiple copies of this, so I'm certainly willing to pass it up if you'd like to review it.
is that the dimensions?
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you they're 100% accurate, but they're very approximate.
It's gonna be like a half of, this is 36 here by 24. This is an open bay.
It's almost going to be formed in an L shape, and that's why he's having a hard time telling you the dimensions. Again, I think you guys have that part in your packet, I believe. This one here?
I think it's both doors. You got to get the official way of
Oh, we got to start. We got to go clockwise.
She just puts it in the record.
And I apologize. I thought maybe y'all had that one. So. Yeah. Mr. Law, so those are the extra photos y'all aren't using, or are those extras, or? Okay.
So, I mean, it looks like on this drawing that there's the wall, he said it wasn't going to be enclosed, but there would be a brick wall, and that wall is between him and his neighbor. Is that correct?
Yeah, because that's what.
So there is privacy between, I mean, him and his neighbor, and how tall is that? Is that about 8 feet? What is?
Yeah, 8 feet. Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
So it's not a taller structure than you probably could have.
No,
as a permitted fence.
That's correct.
I mean, you could have an 8-foot, you could have an 8-foot opaque fence.
That's also governed by our HOA that allows us to have only a certain height.
I'll let these go around. Are there any other questions at this point? Is there anything that you'd like to add while everybody's taking a look at the last documents you have?
No.
Did the homeowners association, sorry, still getting used to this. Now I'm on. Did the homeowners association have any comments, or is there any feedback? Now I'm looking at staff too.
We have not received, I don't believe we've received any comments. Any we received would have been in the packet, and I don't recall having received them. I'll double check to confirm.
Thank you.
Again, it's a small neighborhood. The gentleman that is our, that's sort of in charge of that, a man by the name of Dan Allen, he has some concerns. He came to spoke to Mr. Molina. Mr. Molina showed him the plans, and that tended to take care of his concerns. It's not uncommon in this neighborhood for people to build these types of structures and to improve their lot. In fact, I wish I could build one like that myself.
Any other comments or questions for the applicant? Anything else you'd like to add? Anything else?
No, I'm sorry. No, I do not. No,
Okay.
I apologize.
All right, we will close the public hearing and discuss.
Okay.
I mean, we have definitely considered cases where, you know, there's an existing slab or structure, and if the neighbor is not opposed and it doesn't look like it's going to do harm, and in this case, the neighborhood association representative or president, whatever, the person that was contacted, didn't have concern. These are cases that we certainly consider. I mean, it is a strange lot, and there does appear to be some topography issues. So I don't know what else. What do you all think?
I agree with you. I also think he's asking for the largest reduction is 8 feet, which is on that one corner, and then it slants in based upon both the photographs and the drawing, so it's not a consistent reduction down to 2 feet.
I do think it's fair to, because the drawing shows a wall but no real enclosure. I do think it's important, if we were to grant the variance, that we grant it with the conditions that it not be completely enclosed and that there not be plumbing as part of any construction. And if the request was ever to do that, they would need to come back to the board. Again, I don't know how everybody else feels about the variance, but I think that's a fair condition. Any other thoughts?
Well, I don't feel comfortable with it, so I won't vote in favor of the, I'm sure your motion's going to be great, but I think that
It might be thoughtful, it might not be great.
you always have thoughtful motions, and your analysis was thoughtful. But I do think the concrete pad is new, and it's part of this construction that was going to occur. Oh, this one? And I do worry about the proximity to the neighbor, and the neighbor hasn't been able to be involved, and I would feel more comfortable if that neighbor, and I understand the circumstances, but I would feel more comfortable. And I do think there's more room to push the cabana a little bit towards the pool.
And you know, we can ask the applicant about the concrete pad. It was on the Google Earth photo, and the cabana part. I mean, you can see the concrete pad there. So it without the cabana. So it's I don't know how frequently these Google Earth things refresh, but you can see the pad in that picture.
Like a different shape to me.
It may be. So maybe it's been added to, right? You're the architect, so no.
She is the expert.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the question is, I mean, we can we can see where everybody is and make a motion if you feel like, if a motion doesn't pass, then we could maybe defer to get some comments from the neighbor.
Yeah, I appreciate that nobody is here opposing it, and it looks like a nice structure, and I think we still have to have a hardship, and I may have missed it, but I don't see, I haven't understood why it can't be moved over to comply with the zoning requirement. So I'm not seeing the hardship, but, and I'd like to see some hardship, and not just nobody objects to it. And it is a very nice structure. It's, but that's kind of where I am, and so.
I'm going to echo your words that I don't see a hardship or it's a self-imposed hardship that they put in there, but I'm also concerned if the neighbor directly affected had a loss in family, obviously isn't going to be focused on the construction on the cabana. And I think while it might improve the overall neighborhood, I'm not going to be able to vote for it for the two reasons that have been set out so far. So now we're getting into, you may have a great motion, you may have enough votes, however.
Well, I mean, and certainly every single one of us has the ability to make a motion at any time. I want to make sure everybody remembers that. But, I guess the question is, for those who have concerns, and there may not be four that have concerns, there may be, would it help if the neighbor had input? I mean, is there a greater sense, and I think from what I hear from you is it's like, well, I don't see a hardship in the neighbor, everybody could like it, I don't see a hardship, which is certainly fair enough. But I guess that's the question is, and maybe somebody just needs to make a motion and see where we are.
I'm happy to make a motion. I would make a motion that we grant the variance based upon the hardship that the concrete pad was already laid and it's already within the side setback. He is using that pad and creating the structure. There is no opposition in the small neighborhood. He has counsel who is also a neighbor. I would also add that he would not be allowed to enclose the structure.
Or put plumbing.
Or put plumbing in the structure. That would require an additional trip to the board.
And I would second that.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye and raise your hand. All opposed to the motion, say aye and raise your hand. Opposed, I'm sorry, opposed. Did you vote?
I didn't vote. I was still thinking.
Okay. So that motion is 3-3 and does not pass. As someone who is, not to put you on the spot, but I'm obviously putting you on the spot, as someone who's on the fence, is there a path that you see to help you get to an answer one way or the other?
I was sort of, as the presentation was going on, I was sort of wondering like what the hardship was and why it couldn't be closer to the pool. Like I think it would help to have pictures as to sort of see where this is in relation to the pool. But also I do think if it's limited, if it's limited just to this like one little area, it's not enclosed, that helped me. So that's why I'm just sort of like, I don't know, I see both sides. So I didn't.
Oh yeah. I do too. I think everybody.
So I think for me, I guess I would just like maybe the applicant or the applicant's counsel can just flesh out what his perspective is on what the hardship is, and maybe that would help me decide one way or the other.
So you'd prefer to open the public hearing for additional questions?
Just one question.
No, that's fine.
Because I didn't hear really what the hardship was.
Does anyone object to opening the public hearing? And that way you can ask about the pad or what, any questions anybody has. We will reopen the public hearing and for questions.
So I guess my question is, so what exactly is your hardship in this case? Because it does look like the concrete pad is new to her point.
It has been redone. In other words, it's not new, but it's been
There was a sinkhole there and to.
If you could turn your mic on, if you're going to speak, and state your name and address, please.
Yes, I'm Richard Molina. There, when I.
Address.
My who?
Your address.
236 Ashan Boulevard, Oda Grade 37138. When I purchased the property, there was in the pool, there was a sinkhole in the concrete. The slabs were going in, and there was puddle outside. And that was probably the reason we got a deal on the property. But when we started fixing it, it was more than we were supposed to. That's why the concrete is new. And we redid it just to make it one whole slab instead of having to, just to stop the water from puddling on top.
So you basically sort of repaired it because of a sinkhole issue? And
Yes.
that's why you've placed this
Yes.
where it is?
Yes, and I have my, the guy who did the appraisal, pictures of all that damage. That's why they gave me a discount on the house.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Are there any other questions?
When you purchased a lot, you would have gotten a survey of the property and would have shown that pad, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you already knew that, yeah,
Sorry.
so you already knew that that was there, but you also knew that there was a close encroachment at that point in time with what you were planning on doing.
Close approachment.
Mr. Hoover, you might want to help him.
He's talking about what you bought. Maybe all you know that you were within.
No, I didn't because I was continuing. I didn't know that because the pad was already there. We just continued to the same pad that was there. I didn't.
That's not part of his question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What he's saying is, basically saying, look, you bought this with knowledge that this concrete pad was as close as it was to the other fence
yes,
line, right?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, we will reclose the public hearing. Okay. Since we had, would you like to reinstate your motion and just see where we are on that? Or would anyone else like to make a motion?
I'm happy to reinstate that motion, which was seconded, I think.
Yes, I seconded it, and I will again.
All right, so the motion is back on the floor and seconded. Any more discussion, final discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye and raise your hand. And those opposed? That motion passes 4-3. Good luck. Thank you. Next case.
Before we move on to our next case, have a couple of quick announcements. Case 2019-325 involving property at 739 Mormons Arm Road. I apologize, I failed to include this in the consent agenda. We received notice midday that they agreed to planning's recommendation on the sidewalk request. So if
Okay,
the
so we'll
board,
just move that to the consent agenda. Is there a second? Second. Have a motion, have a second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Passes.
and then case 2000, on the short-term rental docket, case 2019-338 involving property at 1415 Forest Avenue. That case has been withdrawn. Moving on now to case 2019-335. No, I'm sorry, 337. Involving property at 1115 Lishy Avenue. Is the appellant here? This is a request for a sidewalk variance in order to construct a single-family residence without building sidewalks or paying into the sidewalk fund. Before you is a zoning map showing the zoning of the property as SP. Aerial photography giving you a sense of the surrounding area. This is the site plan submitted by the applicant. And finally, photographs showing you the current conditions of the property. Is there anyone here in opposition to case 337? Seeing none, you'll have 5 minutes to make your presentation. Please be sure to identify yourself by name and address.
Good afternoon. My name is Elliot Croy. I live at 166 Jacksonian Drive in Hermitage. My brother and I started a construction company earlier this year. This was our first project lot we've purchased. There was a house previously on this lot. It had been torn down by some point. I know the church down the street had some involvement with it. Past that, I don't know anything else. But what currently the zoning sidewalk would like us to do is have a 6-foot setback from the curb, followed by another 6 foot of sidewalk.
Are you familiar with the planning department's recommendation?
Uh,
Because the planning department recommends that you maintain the existing sidewalk in a state of good repair. Any portion of the sidewalk that's not ADA compliant would be removed and replaced in kind. It doesn't appear that that's an issue. And that you pay for the frontage. So that's kind of what's on the table now. So nobody's asking for a 6-foot grass strip and 6-foot sidewalk anymore.
Yeah, we just got that email yesterday, so I'm
Okay.
sorry. But that's just kind of some backstory going into it of what
Right.
they wanted. So since the sidewalk's there, we were just trying to get the variance so we didn't have to do some crazy U with the sidewalk. And, we're also looking to not pay into the sidewalk fund. I do know we have a project coming up later this year. It's got 150 foot worth of frontage that we will be having to pay into the sidewalk fund for. So we're just trying to get a little break now and see if we can work with what's already in place, go from there.
How much frontage do you have on this project? 50, okay.
Well, and, the sidewalk law is changing, I think, in 2 weeks. So I don't know how that impacts you with your next project.
I was not aware of that.
Or how it could possibly, and don't ask me, I'm not a member of the council, I just know they've passed it and it's going into effect on the 1st of September. The codes folks can help you with that one. But I guess it's just really rare that we would go against the council's bill and not have folks pay anything. Often if you're on a corner lot and you got 150, 200 feet, this board sometimes, depending upon the specifics of the case and the property, have been willing to have you just pay for one side of it or to reduce the frontage to be more in line with your neighbors. But your frontage seems to be exactly like what all your neighbors have.
Yes, it's exactly the same.
I don't see an obvious hardship that would just say, hey, I'm going to have to pay a lot more than my neighbors or do anything differently. So is there something special about it that would have us take another look at you not paying into the fund?
Well, we did go ahead and bid out what it would cost to do, the actual setback, 6 foot from the curb, followed by 6 foot. And that's actually going to be a little bit cheaper than paying into the sidewalk fund based off of that. So we were trying not to do something that sticks out in the neighborhood solely based on price. So we're just trying to keep the neighborhood where it's at. We can use, it's almost $8,000 what we'd have to pay. Use that for landscaping. We would also get to keep mature trees. We don't have to mess with the neighbor's property. We've spoken to neighbors, not just on each side of the house we're building, but further down. And they said they would like to see the sidewalk stay the way it is.
What would it cost to replace the sidewalk?
To replace the sidewalk?
To bring the sidewalk up to code?
It was about $6,000, $6,200. So that's a little bit cheaper. Obviously, we don't want to do that because we know if you're handicapped, you're going to have to make a right turn, a left turn, a left turn, a right turn just to go straight. As well as planting grass out front, we know that most people are just going to walk right through it. They're not going to want to follow the sidewalk. So we're just trying to keep everything with the neighborhood to conform.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, I don't believe so.
All right, we'll close the public hearing.
I have
Thoughts?
a question of you all, and I don't think the applicant could answer it possibly. Why is he required to pay into if he's going to be allowed to keep the same sidewalk? I don't understand that request.
Well, that's not a legal requirement. The property, I believe, is not fund eligible, if I recall, without being able to refresh my memory. The planning department has recommended that he contribute in lieu since if you don't require him to install a sidewalk that meets the current standard, which would be a bigger sidewalk, planning has recommended, since they're allowing him to leave the sidewalk, they've recommended that he contribute in lieu.
And I do think that it's been determined that we have the ability, if there's some established reason that we all agree, or 4 of us agree, that we can decrease that. It's rare that we do that, but that's possible. The contribution to say, well, you're responsible for, based on the circumstances of this case, 25 feet. But that's extremely rare that we do that, and usually there's something that's a little more obvious, like an NES something. I mean, these are to me, these are the cases that are a little bit tough. I don't know how the new law would impact this person.
The main difference, I believe, on this property or the next project, not knowing the specifics of that, the new law the sidewalks will be triggered based on the appraised value of the structure, not the assessed value of the structure, so there'll be a higher trigger. There's also a process with respect to a waiver versus a variance, but that's not really an issue for the board. So if it's triggered, the requirements are still the same in terms of the current standards, and if he wanted a variance, he would have to get the recommendation for planning, same with the waiver process. So the main difference I think that would affect him would be it would be triggered based on a higher value of the structure. So it may or may not be triggered depending on what that project is and what the structures are on that property.
And this is one of those examples that it's not rare, but it's not totally common, where planning recommends keeping the sidewalk, or oftentimes historical recommend keeping the sidewalk, but the applicant will come and say, hey, it really is substantively cheaper for me to put in a new one than to keep the old one, and yet the folks who in the neighborhood and whatnot, they want to keep the old one. To me, this is just one of those situations where the law that applies to every property there doesn't always take into account situations like this, where the incentive is to build something new, which oftentimes a lot of folks would rather not have that, but that's just how it is.
And the current rate of the in lieu fee is $152 per linear foot, so he's looking at about $7,600 for in lieu versus what, $6,500 or so to install.
Okay. Any other questions?
I do. Is there a cap that someone wouldn't pay over?
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. The new law, not presently, the new law imposes a 3% of the value of the construction would be the max contribution to the in lieu fund. So if the construction is $100,000, they'd be capped at 3% of that.
Do you know the value of the construction?
It will be close to 240.
If I can make a suggestion, you might want to defer and look at the new sidewalk bill that's
Is that
going to be in
possible?
effect.
Could an applicant withdraw and?
He could withdraw. Anybody can withdraw at any time. So he.
But I guess the question, because we may have this is the last meeting that we're going to have before the sidewalk law's in effect. But for applicants who 3 weeks from now are going to have a better deal, what's the right process?
Mr. Chairman, an important point there is, yes, the new version of the sidewalk law, Council Bill 2019-1659, takes effect September 1. We'll be back in the office after Labor Day on, I think it's Tuesday the 3rd. So that's the first day we'll be looking at these. The waiver process to which we referred is one that would probably be a 3 or 4 week turnaround. So the process would be, I file for the application for my building permit. I see that I hit the sidewalk trigger, or I'm required to build sidewalks. Somehow I think I've got a hardship that necessitates a relief from that sidewalk requirement. I ask for the waiver. That's a line item in the building permit application. The appropriate agencies, specifically Public Works, Stormwater, Planning, and the Zoning Division, all review the case, come up with a written recommendation, and ultimately, by law, the zoning administrator will be charged with making a determination whether any relief will be granted and what relief that is, i.e. the waiver. Again, because we think that will take, and we don't know because we haven't gone through it yet, but we think that will take 3 to 4 weeks, hopefully. And by hopefully, I mean no more than that. Hopefully, it will be as little as that. You're really not seeing answers to those requests until end of September, start of October, realistically. So for those who have come to the BZA for today's hearings, mid-August, they're going to get an answer sooner here. And of course, we never presume to put ourselves in the shoes of those making business decisions. But yes, there is a different cost with one approach versus another. There's also the business of potentially waiting 6 weeks to find out an answer to the question. And for those on the building side of the equation who are burning either construction loans or mortgages,
that time very literally equals money. So we have found most people have been inclined to go ahead and pursue their BZA remedies while the law is still in effect toward that end, rather than waiting to see what comes of the new law that will take effect in September. Forgive me if I've over-answered the question, but I thought I was maybe anticipating the next couple.
Would you want to withdraw it based on what you just heard, or is that 6-week window?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm sorry.
I would also point out that in the waiver process, and I apologize if you said this and I missed it, but the departments that make a recommendation to the BZA are the same departments that are going to make the recommendation to the zoning administrator. So presumably, although I can't speak for them, but I would imagine, just in case this matters, I would imagine that the same people reviewing the same case under the waiver process would likely make the same recommendation to the zoning administrator. So I don't know if that makes a difference or not. I don't know what the zoning administrator's decision would be. He doesn't get a vote here, so he would make his own decision on the waiver process. But that is something to consider, is that presumably the recommendation would be the same from those departments.
Well, and I don't know what they would, if they recommended the same, that would be paying into the in lieu at the current rate, which is $153, which is still less than the 3% of the $275 he said. I mean, he said, oh, it's $275. Well, 3% of that is $8,200. So, if $7,500 is the current in lieu fund, that cap is not going to help him. And so then presumably we'd be back to the negotiation between planning and the zoning administrator. We don't have your input because that's not part of the rules now, but we certainly have planning's input. And so that's, again, we may have another, I don't know if we have another sidewalk case today, but I think when the law is changing, I think it's fair to at least explore, all those things. So I thank you. Appreciate it. Does everybody kind of understand? Everybody kind of follow that? Any other comments or?
No, there's just a lot I'm trying to pick up on, so excuse me if I'm missing something, but I don't have anything else to add right now.
All right, we will close the public hearing and ask for your thoughts.
I don't see any hardship. I would vote to approve it with the conditions put on it by planning.
I will second.
So we have a motion and we have a second. And does that also give him the option to build it up to codes if he chooses?
Yes, well, by law, he can build it up to code.
Okay,
This is
all
just
right, so
another tool
that's
in his
not,
toolbox.
we're not forcing an answer, but we're saying here's your plan B if you want it.
Correct.
Okay, we have a motion. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? That passes. All right, good luck.
So just to be clear.
To be clear, we approved the planning. That means that you can either build the new sidewalk or you can keep the old sidewalk and pay the in lieu fee.
Okay, thank you very
All
much.
right, sure thing. Good luck.
Next case, 2019-341, involving property at 2414 Sterling Road, requesting variances from the setback and height restrictions in order to construct a detached garage onto an existing building and then use the existing building for a pool house. Before you is the zoning, showing the zoning of the property is R10. Aerial photography showing the surrounding area. Site plan submitted by the applicant, and finally, photographs showing you the current conditions of the property as well as up and down the street. Is there anyone here in opposition to case 341? Seeing none, is the appellant here? John Tissell? Mr.
All right,
Chairman?
I will move that we defer this one meeting, just as our standard procedure to give everyone one courtesy deferral. Got a motion to defer, got a motion to second, or that has a second. All in favor, say aye. That case is deferred to the next meeting.
Next case, 2019-342, involving property at 313C Prince Avenue. Is the appellant here on this case? Carla Newman is the appellant. I don't see her, but is there anyone else here on case 2019-342? I don't see anybody, Mr. Chairman.
Well, again, we'll move that we defer that. Have a second? All in favor? All right, that meeting is deferred one meeting.
Next case, 2019-343, involving property at 102 Duke Street. The appellant is here on that one, so we'll proceed. This is a request for a variance from parking requirements in order to construct an office development. I would note for the board, and the appellant can elaborate on his request, but 42 spaces are required, and he is requesting 28, and that the UZO standards be applied. This is the zoning map showing you the current zoning of the property is CS, over on the left side. Aerial photography showing you the surrounding area. Site plan submitted by the applicant, and finally photographs showing you the current conditions of the property. Is there anyone here in opposition to case 343? Seeing none, the appellant will have 5 minutes. Please make sure you say your name and address.
Good afternoon. My name is Chip Howarth. Address is 2606 Eugenia Ave, Suite D, 37211. My argument centers around the UZO, which admittedly isn't a great argument, but the purpose of the UZO, when enacted 20 years ago, was to promote reinvestment in areas of Metro originally developed before the 50s by modifying development standards that could add unnecessary expense without improving safety or compatibility of resulting development. So what we are proposing to do on the site is, I don't know if you can see from the site plan, but we have 7, I forget the exact square footage of each, essentially they're Quonset hut office spaces and designed for individual users, small businesses. It's very hard to find 2,500 square feet to rent these days in Nashville. We are literally a property away from Dickerson Pike and less than a mile from the UZO boundary. Under current code, because we were outside the UZO, we were required to do 1 space per every 300 square feet. So combining all of our square footage, that means that we have to do 42 spaces. If we were within the UZO, which is again less than a mile away, we would be able to exclude 2,000 square feet, and then we would be able to apply 1 space for every 500 square feet, which would put us at 22 spaces. We are currently showing 28 spaces. We feel, given the proximity to Dickerson Pike, the rapid evolution of the Dickerson Pike corridor, the fact that Metro is going after money to do transit on Dickerson Pike, and just sort of the evolution of North Nashville in general, the application of the more than 20 years-ish old parking requirements is not appropriate for the site, and we ask for relief from this board today. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
So the purpose is office? Are these going to be 7 office?
Correct.
And each office is 2,500 square feet?
Roughly, I can pull up the exact.
So there's no residential?
No. The current, the total square footage of all offices combined is 12,600, so divided by, or 500 divided by 7 gets you, where does that get you? I don't have that in front of me. Someone who's better at math than I did this calculation. It's not very clear on the site plan, I apologize. Each one is approximately 1,200 square feet. Sorry.
Okay, how did you get the math down?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
7 offices and 3 buildings.
Well, so they're all individual Quonset huts. So there's 7 individual buildings.
So basically, to get 10 more spaces, you'd have to lose one of your huts.
Correct. Well, under the current current code, we need 14 more spaces than what is shown on that site plan. Total of 42 spaces.
Which boundary are you using to calculate the UZO? Because it's my understanding that the UZO line stops at Douglas.
Sure. We use the map that is attached to this packet as an exhibit.
Yeah, I know. So
Yeah.
It shows Douglas, and I calculated that via Google Maps to be about 2 miles.
2 miles, I'm sorry, yeah.
We don't have any idea what offices, what type of office service this is.
I mean, the idea would be just general office. I mean, with the amount of people moving here, again, my client who's developing, I'm representing him as the engineering firm. My client's developing him, has done some residential development down the street, saw an opportunity to buy this property. A lot of his people that are buying his houses are people moving into town and start businesses. And the idea was to provide them with opportunity to have office close to home. Yeah, in a hut. They're actually pretty cool. I didn't provide an image of them, but there's a couple over by my office in Berry Hill, which are neat. Kind of like, think of like the, the salt barn off 40 when you're coming into town. Sort of like that, obviously much smaller.
Other than the proximity to the UZO, which, is there any other information or data or any type of evidence that you would have to support that this specific office space would need less parking?
In terms of the use?
Yes.
Other than just the fact that I would argue that the likely user that we're planning on is, has alternative mobility concerns, where the ideal target is literally the people we're building. He's building 35 townhomes right next door. And those conversations with those potential buyers is what spurred this idea.
Okay.
But in terms of an exact type of office use, I don't have any information on that front.
Are there any?
So that you have no clue what's going to be in here. Is that correct?
Other than just general office, yeah.
General offices.
Correct.
You've got two, I'm going to call them handicapped. There's probably a new fancier phrase for it. Parking places that you're attempting to go with, and you're going to have separate, you're going to have 7 separate different buildings, basically, and 22 parking places, or 28 parking places.
28 parking places,
28
yes.
parking places. And you're going to have 35, did you say, next door? 35? I know that's not on this, but you're going to have more people in the area.
Well, yeah, just in terms of, he has done residential developments down Duke on both sides of the street, and just saw the demand of people moving in that area.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask, what is that drawing, what does it represent? You've got the bottom row, 3 of the offices, and then there's something that's shaped oddly. What is that? I can't see it on my map. It's
Sort of the
large.
weird square
Yeah,
shape in the middle.
yeah.
Those are stormwater.
No, I don't mean, it's not square. On the very bottom left side, what is that?
Yeah, the biopond.
Oh, is that what that is? I can't read the writing under
Yes,
here.
ma'am.
It's tiny. And so if you were going to extend that parking lot, you would have to not build one of those 3 that is at the bottom. Is that?
So the way the property line is shown, you can kind of see it at the top. We are up abutting, if you look at plan left, right there, we are abutting the property line. We can't go any farther that way. We held the bottom left area for stormwater, and then had to figure out a way to do dumpsters, which you see in the middle of the plan. And then turn around for trash pickup and other emergency vehicles. So we can't go any farther to plan left.
Any other questions?
Did I read the actual lot is less than an acre? What is the size of this development, proposed development?
It's 0.81 acres.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Does CS zoning wouldn't prohibit you from building 2-story structures or taller than a 1-story structure?
Not to my knowledge.
All right. Do you have anything else to add?
I'm happy to take any more questions, but I think.
Any other questions? All right. No questions, so you're good? All right, we'll close the public hearing. Thoughts, comments, motion?
Okay, I'm not quite there, and maybe I'm always difficult on the parking reduction requirements, but I don't, on a lot of this size, I think we just have, for my thought, there's too much unknown, even because what's going to happen is it's pretty tiny. I mean, they may really not need that much parking. You may have people in these offices that only need 1 or 2 spots per person. I just think it's too early for me to grant a variance based on what we've heard of this amount. I do like the argument that it's near the UZO. I like the argument that it's near Dickerson Pike, but it's not compelling to me today.
Yeah, I agree. I feel he maybe could get a parking variance, but we're not the right board. To me, it's more of a planning department conversation with them, which might require a SB rezoning, which I'm sure his client doesn't want to go through that process. But I think that's would be a more inclusive way to have the planning department look at that and what they're seeing in that area. And I just don't see the hardship for this particular case.
Well, and as I think you'd said too, there are options to have the same square footage and get the parking, whether it's a second story. So are you all making a motion, or are you?
Sorry.
I'm
sorry.
the public hearing's closed, but.
I was going to offer to defer and provide more information if that would be helpful to this board.
Thank you. We'll take that into consideration. I think that you can make a motion. Our rules are, if this site plan is not acceptable because you don't feel a hardship, we can vote this site plan down. If the applicant comes with another plan, then I think it is, to some extent, the discretion of this board to accept it within the next 6 months. I think if it's altered in a way that has substantially lower requests, and I think, to me, that may be something I would consider bringing back. I don't want to keep the applicant from bringing back something to this board within the next 6 months, but I also don't see any path for this specific plan to get a request. So if you all think a deferral's to have him come back with a better site plan, or if you want to send a signal to say, hey, no, we're not going to vote on this thing any way you present it, you've got to be more creative in terms of how you tackle this in terms of the parking needs, not in terms of the creativity of the plan. So defer or to
No, I think this plan is not. It's not a plan that I would be in favor of. My colleagues may feel differently, but it seems to me that if we're sort of in agreement that we should deny, and he can come back with another site plan.
If that's a motion, I would second it.
I'll make that a motion.
All right, there's a motion and there's a second, and the motion is to deny the variance request, but allow the applicant to present a different plan within 6 months, should they choose, not be bound by that rule.
Agree.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, good luck. Thank you.
Next case, 2019-344. Before we move on to this case, I've been asked by ITS to remind members of the public as well as board members to turn your mics on when you're speaking so that they can pick up the audio for the for Metro Nashville Network. So please be sure to turn your mics on when you're speaking.
Does anybody need a 5-minute?
Looks like Mr. Lawless does.
Yeah. Members is leaving, so I think let's just take,
So we'll take a quick break.
A quick break to allow everybody to.
This is an item D appeal requesting to allow a change from a static message board to an LED sign in the CN district. Zoning map before you demonstrates that zoning. Area photography giving you a sense of the surrounding area. These are photos submitted by the applicant of the existing sign, I believe. Is that correct? And then photographs showing you the current conditions of the property, as well as up and down the street. Is there anyone here in opposition to case 344? Seeing none, Mr. Henry, be sure, please, to state your name and address before you have your 5 minutes before the board.
Thank you, Ms. Lamb. Members of the board, Mr. Chairman, my name is Sean Henry, 315 Dedrick Street, representing the property owner here, which is Collins Road LLC. With me here today is David Farrar with Jarvis Sign Company. He's in the front row in the event that there's a question, a technical question that he may be better suited to answer. This particular sign on Highway 100 is a legal sign. It was constructed legally. It's 14 feet tall. Last year, the Metro Council, through sponsor Councilman Dave Rosenberg for District 35, passed the River Trace Urban Design Overlay. That UDO established a maximum height of ground signs of 7 feet. So this sign is approximately twice as tall as it should be. We have a two-story building on this property, and we would submit that it's one of them, probably the most attractive commercial building in this area of Harpeth Village. So we have a non-conforming sign because of its height. And the UDO allows panels to be changed out. That's permitted. However, digital signs are not. And so what I have handed out as a supplement to the pictures that are on the screen there is a packet of photos with a cover sheet from Collins Road LLC. What's unique about this particular property, and we believe this request before you, is that this is a multi-tenant building. Unlike any of the other buildings that we have to compare to here that also have some digital signs already, this is a multi-tenant building. Paragon Strength and Fitness is the namesake on the property itself, and then you have some other businesses who are also in the building. I'm not sure if staff mentioned that Councilman Rosenberg is supportive of this request because we've amended our proposal that this LED message board will be monochrome and not a color sign. So that was a modification of what we had submitted to you, and Councilman Rosenberg is supportive of that. If I may, I'd like to just kind of come through these photographs. The very first photograph, page 1, again, is how the building looks as of yesterday. Certainly attractive, very well landscaped, and importantly, there's no building signs. There's no sign on the building whatsoever, and there could be. My client could, through the UDO, apply for and place numerous signs on the building facade, but they prefer not to because of its architecture. The next couple of pages here, page 2, is the primary principal tenant, Paragon Fitness, a personal care operation. Next is Barber Cabinet Company. They have a design studio in there and some products that you can have them design your cabinets and then order through them. Moving into page 4 is a series of maps that follow from Google. And this particular one is 2 years old, but down in the corner you'll see where Mr. Barber of Barber Cabinet Company has been trying to let people know where his business is on this property, and he's had sometimes had a sign in there referring people to the back of the property to get to him. He would no longer have to do that, and certainly would not do that if this request is approved. Page 5 is a comparison of the sign that's there now, the static message board, which reads, "Now offering off-season athlete programs, sign up today." That is the area which is 24 square feet that would be replaced with digital. And that would allow all 4 of these other tenants to be advertised one at a time, as opposed to all 4 of those tenants being placed on this sign, so that we now have 5 tenants on this sign. Paragon would remain as the namesake. The other tenants would be able to advertise there one at a time. Across the street, of course, you've got Ace Hardware and their digital sign. And I think this is important for existing context and the surroundings to be considered here. Page 6, we've got a unique location as well. We're at a street corner at a lighted intersection of Collins Road and Highway 100. That distinguishes this property, in our opinion, from the other businesses up and down Highway 100 here. And importantly, they could have 2 ground signs because they have 2 frontages, but again, they're not proposing to do that. They want to keep the sign they have and simply swap out that 3-foot by 8-foot area. Page 7, again, is looking back east. We believe the sign's appropriately scaled compared to this 2-story building. On the right, you see Ace Hardware. Across the street, again, page 8, Ace Hardware with quite a few signs on the building facade. As well, you see the digital sign on its monument sign. Page 9, the property's well landscaped. There's no wall-mounted building signs on the subject property. And then in nearby context, you have a Walgreens. It's just at the next traffic light moving east. There's a digital message board that they have below their sign on the monument sign, and I'm almost through here. But also they've got wall-mounted building signs that my client is not proposing to install. And then finally, the very last page, across from Walgreens, is the YMCA, which has a digital message board as well. So simply want to conclude that the area context, what we're asking for, we think certainly fits within the area of context. And importantly, the criteria for a nonconforming sign that's applicable here is this improvement, the swap out of this message board, is less than 50% of the cost of the replacement of the entire sign. So we don't have to bring the sign into total compliance as a result of compliance with that provision. And secondly, it's a multi-tenant lot, and they're free to replace and alter so long as they don't exceed 15% of the building area of the sign. The sign we're talking about here, the total sign's less than 2.5% of the building facade. So it's much smaller than what would be otherwise permissible. Thank you.
So does the Ace, Walgreens, and YMCA signs, those were all installed before the UDO?
Yes, sir.
And so they just got there in time?
Correct.
And if this were to be approved, I mean, it sounds like that you want this in lieu of, building signage or another monument sign. So, I mean, would your client be opposed to, a condition that if additional monument signs or building signs were, permitted to be put on the property, that the entire property would be brought up to current UDO code? I mean, would you? I mean, it seems like if we allow this, because you're saying, well, hey, we're not going. This is going to be our only sign, and this is what we want. Then, if all of a sudden they say, well, yeah, we're going to put them all over we're going to do like Ace Hardware across the street, put them all over the building and put another monument sign, but we're going to keep this other sign that we, said was going to replace all that.
Right.
To me, you're asking for an either or. So I guess I would assume there's no opposition to having that as a condition to say, if you're going to put up other signs, you just need to come back and ask to, is that?
That's a fair question, and we did talk about that yesterday, and he is prepared to commit to that.
Okay.
I suspected that by pointing out that there's no building signs on there, and he doesn't want to put building signs on there, that this question may come up. But if he's permitted to do this LED sign, he has no intention of coming back and putting any more signs on the property. And if it were a condition of this approval, that he would not be permitted to do so. That if he pursues a wall sign, then the LED would have to come off. That is an acceptable condition.
Yeah, or that just would at least have to come back and make a case. Okay. And we do have a letter on file from the councilman supporting.
I actually like the suggestion that the applicant made, that it was either or, and just leave it at that without coming back.
I think you always have the option to come back, but just not be so explicit, right? Okay. Are there any other questions for the applicant? Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, sir. Thank you.
All right, let's close the public hearing. Comments?
Remind me, I know it's different for a sign, when you have a non-conforming sign, just what is the law? I know with the structure, it's that you don't want to be move away toward any more non-conforming, but it's something different with a sign, isn't that right?
The code provision related to non-conforming signs is 174690. And I think subsection C talks about a sign shall be brought into compliance if the sign is altered, repaired, restored, or rebuilt to the extent that the cost exceeds 50% of the estimated replacement cost of the sign. If the alteration or repair is caused by involuntary damage or casualty, that would not be applicable here. For single tenant lots, that's not applicable here. For multi-tenant lots, each tenant may replace, alter, repair, or restore an associated sign of a size not to exceed 15% of the facade area of the building occupied by the tenant. I think that's pretty much what applies right now.
Thank you, and I believe Mr. Henry gave us the information that we needed to, if we were looking at that criteria.
I'm going to make a motion with Grant.
Can I offer
I'm sorry.
Can I offer just a friendly amendment that he would be, if he's going to try to, that he will only keep that? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So the amendment is that if the applicant is to place any facade signage or any additional monument signage, that all signage would have to conform to the current UDO zoning rules. That's the amendment. So there's a motion to approve with that amendment. Any discussion or comments?
And I second it. I'm not sure you heard me.
So I have for discussion, I don't really see anything wrong with this. I think I think the trade-off is a good one. I don't see any hardship, and I want to see some kind of hardship. And if I missed it, I want somebody to.
On an item D appeal, you're not required to approve a hardship. Hardship is under variance, which is section B, I think. So for the item D, the criteria that I just read out related to signs are what y'all are considering for this, but there's no hardship is required for
Well,
this.
that settles that. So,
But in that vein, I also agree with you. I don't really see an issue with this. But in reading the planning department's analysis, how from their planning study, this sort of sign seemed to be an issue and they were trying to address that. But it also seems kind of unfair considering all of his neighbors have one. So I just wanted to note, like, even though it wasn't a hardship, I was a little concerned because of their analysis.
Well, and I was too, and I'd have it kind of very large on the screen, which I still can't read without my glasses. But I know it basically was saying that, they thought it might increase the degree of nonconformity. I think it was clear to me that the nonconformity had to do with the size of the sign. The digital part is maybe questionable. To me, the compelling thing is the council member who led the charge to have this UDO is saying, hey, no, this is the right exception here. And I think, to me, that's compelling. But
That's exactly why I seconded it, because I'm very impressed with Dave Rosenberg's letter.
Okay, great. So we have a motion, we have a second. Are there any other comments or discussion?
Do we need to? That already agreed.
I think that, well, let's ask if that
That was the intent.
the motion does
That we approve this sign?
Yes.
does apply to the sign and the conditions that the applicant described, which are monochrome and static.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any other comments?
I assume the second still goes with it. Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Good luck.
Moving on now to our short-term rental docket. First case to be considered by the board is case 2019-329 involving property at 1421 Ordway Place. This is an item A appeal challenging denial of a short-term rental permit. The appellant operated after the permit that she had expired. So she operated on an expired permit. One thing I would point out before Mr. Osborne presents the facts to the board on behalf of staff is that this permit was obtained under the law that required the 1-year waiting period if the board determined that operation without a permit had occurred. So this is not one where you have discretion to give up to a year. If you determine that the operator operated without a permit, and in this case where it was on an expired permit, then the 1 year is required. Is there anyone here in opposition to this case? Seeing none, Mr. Osborne will make the presentation for staff, and then the appellant will have an opportunity to speak.
So this property was permitted on May 18th of 2015. It's operated through June of 2019, about 395 rentals. We sent a notice through host compliance about the end of May. I also sent another notice on June 11th for operating two sides of the Dadu. Property had two permits, one for the main dwelling and one for the Dadu. The advertisements were removed around June 15th of 2019.
So are both permits expired?
Correct.
Okay. So they had two permits, but both of them expired at the same time, neither were renewed?
Correct.
Okay. All right, if you could state your name and tell us why you're here.
Catherine Russ, 1421 Ordway Place. So basically, I moved to East Nashville 2000, and then, so I was well aware of all the historic overlays and whatnot. In 2014, I decided to build this Airbnb to supplement my freelance income. I adhered to all the historic codes and everything. So in 2015, my permits since 2015, that I've held a permit for this Airbnb. I wanted to have one for the house in case times were leaner, so I just continued having two Airbnbs, and I've always renewed them every year. I've always paid all the sales and hotel tax. I've always adhered to all the rules and regulations. I never had any complaints. It's a small unit, so there aren't bachelorette parties or anything. This year, I wasn't sent the letter to renew, so it was an oversight on my part, because every year I'm super buttoned up, like I catch it, and then I got a letter from this gentleman, I guess, and then I said, no, I have a permit, and then I gave him my permit number, and he said, no, you don't. So that's how I found out. I immediately went down to Metro the next day, and I took my Airbnb off because they said I could be shut down for 3 years, so I was freaked out. And then I waited, and I met with a gentleman, and then basically he set up this appointment. And I've done everything else that I could to try to get it back. I mean, in the meantime, send out the 150 letters, you know, all the routine, sign in the yard and all that precedes this. So I guess for me, it has just been an oversight. It was 1 month out of 4 years that I had a permit that I didn't have one. So I wasn't, you know, doing this intentionally. That's the end of my case.
Great. Yeah, no, I think that's, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I've been on this board for a long, long time, and it's extraordinarily rare that we ever get letters of support, especially for short-term rentals. And you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the file, in addition to your councilman, who is someone who takes very seriously the short-term rental rules and does not give recommendations to approve lightly. So that bears a lot of weight. And we'll tell you the bad news in a minute, and that is that your permit was granted at a time when this board doesn't have discretion to just say, go get a permit tomorrow. And that's, I tell you, you're exactly the type of person who makes me not like being on this board, because it seems to me, and this is just a personal comment, a good person who follows all the rules, not getting a good result, perhaps. But anyway, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to us?
No, I just was hoping I could get my permit back.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on that, but it just, I followed the train down the road and didn't like where it was going. But anyway, any other questions for the applicant? Then we will close the public hearing.
I don't have a question. I have a comment. Maybe I'm probably not going to get a good answer on it, but her first permit was in 2015. But every year, people are required to apply for new permits, right? It's a 1-year permit. So since that time, she applied for, I don't know, 3 or 4 more permits when we did have discretion. No?
She didn't apply for new permits. She renewed the permit she had. And the state law explicitly said the law in effect at the time she obtained her permit is the law that governs. And as we've discussed before this board in prior cases, that's what the law says. And, you know, you got to take the good with the bad. To some extent, I mean, you get to keep your, if you currently wouldn't be eligible for a permit, but you have it, you get to keep it. But the flip side of that is that if there's an issue and it comes before the board did not have discretion at that time. So it's not basically every renewal is not considered a new permit. She got her permit back in 2015. She's renewed it, but she didn't apply for a new permit.
We do not have evidence in the record that she rented after the permit expired. Is that right?
We have evidence that she rented after the permit expired. We don't have evidence that she rented after we notified her that she had an expired permit. So she was operating on that expired permit, therefore she was operating without a permit.
I'm sorry, I didn't see the, okay, it says it, maybe I misunderstood that. I'm looking at a piece of paper that it tells me the date the advertisement was removed, but it does not tell me the date of the last rental. And that was what was in the record. Is there something else that y'all see?
I've kind of summarized what all those reports say to save on paper for these. From what I saw from June 1st.
I don't, there's not a question, so just hold on one second. I'm just looking at exactly what's in the record that we're dealing with.
So I guess if the permit was fully expired and didn't exist because it's completely expired and it's done, why would this not be a case where you just simply rented without a permit at all?
Well, it's the functional equivalent. If you're renting, if a permit expires and therefore is no longer in existence, you're renting, albeit unintentionally, you're renting without a permit.
Right, but you didn't rent but this applicant didn't rent without a permit in 2015. This applicant rented without a permit in June.
Right.
And so
the law.
Why would we not find that the applicant rented without a permit in June? There was no permit at all because the permit had expired, and therefore it would be like the person who moved here from Houston that didn't know they had to have a permit. We just rented without a permit.
But I'm not sure I understand the question. The 2015 law, when she obtained the permit, is the law that governs that permit. So it expired.
But I'm just saying
she can reapply under the 2015 law, but the regulations of the 2015 law are what govern this permit and this operation, this short-term operation. And so when she operated, once it expired and she operated without it, you go back to 2015 law.
But I'm just saying if
Let me ask that question.
You're not understanding my I'm just saying we're acting like there's an active permit. I mean, if a permit expires, I guess that's how if we're basically saying, hey, she wants to reinstate her permit, but the rule is, no, you got to start over. I mean, even if we said we could do it tomorrow, she's still got to start over. She have a new permit number. She have everything brand new. So I guess the question is, why is it important that everything go back to 2015 if nothing exists right now? I mean, there's no active permit number. She can't renew this specific permit number. She's got to apply and start completely over from scratch. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean,
well, I don't think it sounds. Are you basically?
I'm saying if she ultimately ended up getting the same permit number.
And she would. I mean, or she wouldn't get the same permit number.
No, she gets to reapply and start completely over from scratch.
Under the 2015 law. She can't, I mean, the state law says the law in effect at the time that she obtained the permit is the law that governs. So if she were to reapply, we would, let's just say, for example, that this was a time period when y'all had discretion.
Well,
let's say y'all said she's got 3 months to reapply. When she comes back in and reapplies before codes, we analyze her new application under the law in effect at the time when she got her original permit.
So let me ask a hypothetical, and I'm going to exaggerate it to just get the kind of the idea I'm thinking about. What if she decided, I don't want to do short-term rentals anymore, and I'm just going to do them? 5 years later, from now, she says, you know what, I think I want to do it again. Is she still bound by the 2015 law because she had? No,
because the state law says if you cease operating for 30 months, that permit no longer applies to the property.
So it's a 30-month window.
You remain grandfathered for 30 months, as long as you don't change your ownership, cease operation for 30 months, or 3 violations of a generally applicable law. If you cease operation for 30 months, then you could reapply, but you could not come back and claim the 2015 law. And it goes back to it's the flip side of the flip side of the coin.
So that's the piece of it that lingers. So when I'd said, does it linger with, does it stay with you? Does the ghost of the past stay with you? And it does for 30 months as part of that law, which that was what I was not clear about. So I guess the question to our legal counsel is there a path for this board to do anything less than a year and an applicant of this nature?
Not that I see. I know that John Michael is still talking.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I guess the question was, is there any path?
If she chose to withdraw today, there's a 1-year waiting period. If she chose to withdraw today, the waiting period would start at the time of her last rental versus at the time of the board's finding. She would still have to wait a year, but it would buy her a couple of months that she's already not operated.
So it'd be a shorter period of time.
Correct, but that would be a shorter period of time.
From now, it would be 12 months.
Well, it would be 12 months from now versus 12 months from June or whenever the last operation was. She would have to withdraw. It wouldn't be a board action. It would be a withdrawal.
Unless, I think we did this once before, though, and we said we're just going to defer it indefinitely, and it goes off the docket, and if, for whatever reason, the applicant wants to bring it back, but that way it's not.
The clock has already started.
And then, is that?
That's doable.
Is there any other?
We can ask for advice from Metro Codes, but we're a board that can make our own motion and may not end up being the right motion, but if you found a way, they may not like the motion, but I mean, that's why there is a board, so that we can evaluate these things. And you were saying a lot of good, interesting things, David, and if you made some kind of motion, I would probably vote in favor of it. And
the only thing I would just state for the purposes of the record, the board is certainly entitled to make its own decisions. Our legal advice would be to create an illegal act or one that we know flies in the face of the law or what Title 17 states.
Ms. Carpenter, more pointedly, if y'all are looking for a remedy, the path to that is a determination that all these codes employees were inaccurate in their determination that the permit expired, inaccurate in their determination that the law then says you have to apply under the previous law, and inaccurate in applying that law to interpret it that you don't get a reduction of the 1 year from the BZA. If the finding of the board, as a finding of fact, is that those are the circumstances, then you would say, well, we just think the staff got it wrong, appeal granted. That's the path to that outcome. The path that Ms. Lamb outlined, wherein there was an indefinite deferral, which I think the board has done, as the chairman noted one other time, is a path to slightly less than 1 year than today, as the wait period before the property owner and appellant would be able to come in and apply for a new permit. That's obviously a little bit better, I'm sure, in her eyes, not a lot, but a little. But to the implied question, that's the path on how to get there.
Well, and I think that the only added thing to that is that you would also have to disagree with the applicant who admitted that they had who testified that they had rented without a permit. And so I guess to me the bottom line is this is exactly, we already heard this once another time this year, but this is exactly why most of the members on this board, if not all, who were on the board when this law was passed, really tried to get Metro Council to give us some more discretion, which they ultimately did. And it's really, really sad it doesn't apply here.
Mr. Chairman, it might behoove us maybe to ask the applicant if she would rather have us defer it, even though it's a month or two, but to do otherwise is she's asking this board to do an illegal act.
Right.
Which I'm always going to side with the lawyer in this instance, and I've been told that.
Yeah.
Now, I may get outvoted, 1 or 2 months earlier
Yeah, let me-
of being able to get back in
Yeah,
might be better.
Well, and I don't think that what the applicant's asking us to do is to provide the relief at the earliest possible way, and the way you do that is by saying, hey, it's an item A, the zoning administrator erred. In all these cases, we find, in almost all these cases, we find that the zoning administrator didn't err, but we have the ability to lower the penalty, and you're just coming for a lower penalty. The problem that we have with this case, not that we don't have a problem with the case, the problem with the case is that the only thing we can do today is say, yeah, you rented without a permit, which the evidence shows, and you've said that you'd permitted it's expired and you didn't know. And so we can say from today, you have to wait a year to rent it out again. Or we can defer, or you can withdraw the case, or we can defer it indefinitely. So we're just going to defer this till sometime next year. This time next year, say. But if we do that, June, whatever will come around, and that'll be a year from your last rental, and by law, that's when you could reapply. And so the fastest you can get to renting this again is basically to either withdraw the case or have us defer it, and the earliest you'll be able to rent short-term again is in June because of the law that was in place when you got your first permit. And so I think what you've heard is the board challenging and questioning and trying to get anything we can do to make that shorter, because we certainly are empathetic with your situation as your neighbors and your council member, but the law just doesn't give us that option, and we're sad about that. So it really is, you can withdraw the case and apply in June, or we can defer this indefinitely, and that I think are the two paths. And either way, you get the same outcome. If we defer it indefinitely, then if you had to come back to here, if you had to come back, then you wouldn't have to pay another fee. So that may be the one that covers all the bases.
So then I just have to come back in June and apply just like for a permit as if it's my first time?
Yeah, in June, whatever, 1 year after the very last time you rented it that you and Mr. Osborne, agreed to, that's when you could apply for a permit again.
Okay.
All right, so I will move that we defer this case indefinitely.
And I will second that.
Have a motion, have a second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Great. Good luck.
Thanks.
Last case for the board to consider is case 2019-339 involving property at 924 Chickasaw. This was a denial of a permit due to operating without a permit, failing to obtain a permit. Mr. Osborne will present the staff, make the presentation on behalf of staff, at which point I don't see anybody in opposition. So after that, you'll have 5 minutes to make your presentation. Just if you speak, make sure you turn on your microphone and identify yourself by name and address.
Good afternoon. My name is Jay Jackson, and I'm an attorney in Murfreesboro at Mitchell & Mitchell, and I'm here on behalf of...
I'm sorry, if our staff could make their presentation first.
Okay.
Mr. Osborne.
All right, so this started operating back in October of 2018 and has been operating through July of 2019, approximately 81 rentals. We did send a notice for this on April 2nd of 2019 for not having a permit. We received a complaint on January 14th of 2019 for operating without a permit. On April 26th, a warrant was issued. A stop work order was posted on May 10th, and the BZA appeal was filed on June 14th. The advertisement has been up and down several times, but finally looks like it was removed again on August 12th. There have been at least 11 rentals since the BZA appeal was filed.
So you have 11 documented rentals since June 14th?
Correct.
And then the warrant, was that for environmental court? Is there a case pending in environmental court?
Yes, sir.
It hasn't gone?
It was scheduled for yesterday, but there was some delay in getting the return back from the Secretary of State. It's supposed to be yesterday. It's supposed to be reset to, I believe, September 18th.
Okay. All right, if you would state your name and tell us why you're here.
My name is Jay Jackson. I'm a lawyer in Murfreesboro, and I represent the property owner here, Mr. Gavin Gossick, and we are here before you with our application, and I'd like to go over a few things with you about that. I'd also like to give Mr. Gossick a chance to speak with you also, but Mr. Gossick does live at 924 Chickasaw. He moved from this home, lived in the home some, and moved from it in January of 2019. October of 2019, I'm sorry. October of 2018. And at that point, he moved to Murfreesboro. And so I think some of the notices that were sent to addresses that were in Nashville. I don't think they were sent to the address in Murfreesboro. Eventually, they did get that Murfreesboro address, hence the warrant that they're talking about with the environmental court. That's where that was served just this past week.
So is this not the applicant's primary residence?
No, sir. Gavin Gossick, 924 Chickasaw Avenue. So we bought this house, my wife and I, because she took a dietitian job local to town, and I travel all across the country for a furniture company that I work for. With that being said, when we found out that she was pregnant and we were having our first child, we had a home in Murfreesboro, and we said, that's a bigger home. Let's move there. Probably better to raise our kids there anyways than East Nashville, where it's a little bit more of a younger crowd, a little bit more diverse. And we decided that, it was better for us to make that move back to Murfreesboro.
And once he did, he did begin operating or renting this out on, I guess, on a short-term rental in terms of the way y'all's ordinance works and the way y'all define it. At the time that he began doing this, he was not aware of this short-term permit rental requirements, and he didn't become aware of those short-term permit requirements until the sign. And I want to make sure, you tell me if I'm wrong, but until the sign that was posted on the property, which I think was in May. At that point, he became aware that there's this permit requirement. At that point, he promptly took down the listing. I think what Mr. Gossick and I talked about this yesterday about the listing, and what he tells me is once this cease and desist sign was put on his property, he took the listing down, and after he took the listing down, he did not schedule any new rentals at that point in time. I think that based on, I think he'll admit that there have been rentals since that sign, but they were for existing reservations. And I think his concern, as he will tell you, is that he had made obligations with these people who are traveling to Nashville, who are coming in, and he carried through with them. Those were the best of his intentions in terms of what he had.
So for my knowledge, when I got the cease and desist, I assume that was to not do any new bookings from there on out, which I have not.
It's pretty clear, though. It says you got to stop and you can't do any more, and you got to cancel everything.
Right. I understand. I didn't understand the cancellation part of it. To be honest with you, I really didn't.
If something says you have to cancel future bookings, what?
It doesn't actually say you have to cancel future bookings.
But it says it's just a stop. It says that you can't do this anymore.
Right, and so I stopped, and that's correct. Actually, to be honest with you, my wife's been running it for me because, like I said, I travel all over the country for the company I work for. With her being pregnant, she can't really work very much as it is, so she does this, and then we have a cleaning crew that we employ to clean the house and to do the things around the house so that my pregnant wife wouldn't be the one to actually do those things.
Okay, and so why did, you got your stop work order on May 10th. Why did it take you till June 14th to apply for?
So she did a lot of the things at the house. She sent out the letters. She did a lot of different things to try and get the permit going. And then when I came back in town, I finished up what I could.
No. You got a letter. You got your stop work order on May 10th.
That's correct.
And you didn't come down to codes until the 14th of June.
Right, because when I leave town for sometimes a month, sometimes 2 months, sometimes at a quarter. I don't have control of my schedule, unfortunately, because I go around and open up new locations for my company. So I apologize that it took so long. It's just I have a very limited time that I could do that. Actually, I had to take vacation time just to come here today, so.
And do you all manage this yourself, or do you have a company that?
We managed it ourselves. Like I said, my wife primarily did it for me.
We also have, I'd like to submit into proof, we also have some letters from some neighbors that these are.
They're the direct neighbors, so you can actually see on the map there the home to the right, the home to the left, and the home straight across the street. They're the closest neighbors. They love us. They love the guests that we have. We've never had issues with them. We never had issues with the guests. They encourage us to continue what we do as a small business. And we'd love to continue it. I know there's a lot of planning and developing in the area. Those particular neighbors would love to see it as a small knit community and try to keep it that way. And of course, we'd love to continue that as well.
I think we understand that this board, under your particular ordinance, when it does make a finding that there's been a rental without a permit, like the last case you dealt with, or you had the issue of you had a permit that had been approved. This is a situation where there's no permit in place in that situation. So you definitely have discretion in terms of how long, if you do apply some sort of a ban or waiting period, as it may be. Understanding, Mr. Gossick understands now much better what his legal obligations are as they relate to the short-term permit. He understands much better. We think this short-term rental process in Nashville is one that is very beneficial to the city in terms of providing opportunities for additional tourists. He's not had problems with the renters per se with those, and we feel like this is something that will be of value to Nashville.
May I, Mr. Jackson, let me ask I can either ask you or your client. I don't care which it is since you're here representing them, but did your client provide an address to Metro when he moved to Murfreesboro?
I'll let him answer. When you say at what
When
point?
he relocated into the house in Rutherford County, did he provide Metro, the governing authorities that he had moved, that issued the permit? I mean, he can answer if you want. I don't know which way you want me to do this, Mr. Jackson. Okay, so you never had a permit.
That's correct, sir.
Okay, so, and you had one complaint at least because you were operating without a permit,
We've
correct?
never had any complaints at all.
No, that's not what I asked. We have testimony before us that there was one complaint on January 14th that you were operating without a permit. So there is a complaint.
Okay, I didn't know what you meant by complaint.
Okay.
I apologize.
And then there's a stop work, there's a notice placard put down in May, correct?
The notice, the cease and desist?
Correct.
That's yes, sir.
Okay. And then you filed your appeal 6 weeks later.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Why'd you wait 6 weeks? You were on the road?
Yes, sir.
Okay, but your wife, she was at home.
That's correct.
And she was running it up to this point.
That's correct.
I realize that she was in the family way, I think is the old-fashioned way of saying it. But she was paying bills, she was paying the mortgage, she was going to the grocery store, she was doing other types of things that people do. Okay. And then you didn't remove the advertisement, or you didn't delist it until August.
No, sir. I delisted it right away. Now, the thing with Airbnb, and that's why it kind of looks funny on the documents where it shows like listed, non-listed, listed, non-listed. So when a guest say they want to look at pictures on there, and they've already made a pre-reservation, they've already reserved this before all of this, and they say, hey, I want to look at the pictures, I want to see where the address is, things like that, you have to relist it for that person to actually get access to them. So when we do that, we have to relist. That's why if you look on there, it shows unlisted, relisted, unlisted, relisted. And it's for that purpose.
You're still marketing it, is what you're doing.
No, sir, not at all. We haven't taken any reservations.
Okay. you didn't remove the advertisement until August 12th.
I'm sorry?
I'm looking at staff's report that on August 12th, it is when the date of the advertisement was removed.
That's not true.
Okay.
I think if I could help.
Well, I want the person who's provided me with the document to tell me, just so I'll know.
Yep, it was reposted 12 times since May 17th. The last time it was removed was August 12th.
Okay.
So since May, we've had people request the addresses and things like that. So we have opened the listing so people could actually see it. We haven't taken any new bookings or reservations in since that time period.
So you're saying that you did this just to honor what was there?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, as I understood him to say, he honored the commitments that he had, but you were letting other people look at it in case they wanted to rent at another time.
No, that's not true.
Well, tell me what is true.
So on the actual website itself, Airbnb, okay, for bed and breakfast, when you deactivate the listing, the people that have the pre-reservations will not be able to see their reservations. They'll not be able to see the address.
So you were only communicating with people that already had reservations.
That's 100% correct.
And, frankly, I'm not really swayed by that, sir. You had no permit. You knew you didn't have a permit. You rented it 11 times in 8 weeks. I mean,
I don't understand what you mean by 11 times in 8 weeks.
well, since the BZA appeal was filed in June, 11 rentals have occurred. So
Those
you had
are
it booked.
pre-booked, though.
I understand.
Okay.
But, we have people come in front of us a lot that
I understand.
cancel a lot of listings to great financial loss, and it affects their host status on Airbnb. We understand that, but it's not, the law allows us discretion. The period of time for which you can be held to not be able to apply is 1 year. Our discretion maybe can lower that time, and it's your job to tell us why it should be lowered. So why should yours be any less than a year?
Let's be honest. I did it without a permit. That's the law. I messed up, and I apologize. Did I know? No, I didn't know. We bought this house with the intention on living there for a long time. Life happens, pregnancies happen, things like that. The house that we have in Murfreesboro is close to good schools. We said this is a great opportunity for us. Let's go back there. Let's continue our life there. And we got, hey, look, you can Airbnb this. We started doing it. We didn't know anything about it. Yes, that's my fault. I messed up. I want to make right. I want to be able to do this. I saw where it can be profitable. It's great for the city because it brings in obviously a lot of new customers, whether it's downtown or wherever. And then it's great for me as a small business. The American dream is all about being your own entrepreneur, being your own business person. I would not want to work for this company any longer if I had the chance. But the opportunity to be able to say, hey, look, I can actually start a business. I can create something for myself, be my own boss. I have my first son coming. I'd love to be able to spend more time with him than be on the road for 3 months out of the year, all the time. I don't want to do that. I'm sure you all wouldn't want to be on the road constantly either.
Okay, great. I think that we're out of our 5 minutes. Are there any other questions for the applicant?
Not for the applicant. I want to ask for my own clarification. If he comes in and applies for a permit, is he applying for owner-occupied or non-owner-occupied?
It depends on what they declare their status to be with regard to the property there on Chickasaw. If they say, I live here, they will have to provide the legal documentation as required by law to demonstrate that that is their owner-occupied address.
Do you know if
Otherwise,
that
it'll be
address is eligible? Because it was.
That's what I should have asked. Is that address eligible?
It's not eligible for non-owner occupied, to my knowledge. I believe this is an RS zoning district. Okay, so with
that was my real question. Thank you for answering the question I didn't ask.
And
you can read my mind.
But the testimony was clear that this is not the primary residence, and that was what the applicant testified. Okay. All right, we will close the public hearing. Discussion. Well,
I don't think I'm telegraphing.
Yeah.
I think I'm telegraphing it about as clearly as I can. I don't see any compelling anything to cut any slack this time. Bottom line.
Well, and I think if he goes and applies for a permit, he won't get it. So what is our purpose here?
I think, I don't know, I think we have to make a decision, and then he could, I think the facts that exist when he applies for the permit, I don't think we can rely on the fact that he may not get a permit, because we don't know, but I would sort of make, this can be a motion or we can just discuss it, but I would say a month for every time it rented after the BZA appeal was filed seems reasonable to me, based on what we've heard. But that's
So you're
my
saying
opinion.
11 months?
Mm-hmm.
I do agree, and you know, we talked about, you know, if you were to take the year and divide it into thirds and say in terms of seriousness is, you know, technicalities in the first third and maybe things that people behave a little bit, or listen, I'm not going to talk about what I think about the behavior, but if the people that follow the directions that they're given in terms of the stop work order, and this is not the first case by any stretch that we've had where folks testified that they didn't think they had to cancel listings, and how everybody interprets that is that, you know, they can interpret how they want. But it tends to be in that it almost always falls into that late into the second, third, or into that last group. So, I mean, in almost all cases, it has been in that kind of 7 to 12 months range. For folks that, you know, or let's say at least 6 to 12 months for the folks that have ignored the stop work order, or so I think that your proposal is certainly in the range, and the most we can do is 12. The least we can do is 0. So it's somewhere, but it's somewhere on that scope.
1129.
Yeah, well, yeah, but again, that's up to up to the board what you feel like is appropriate in this case, and so I mean,
Mr. Chairman, if I can just, and I know I'm coming across a little bit harder than probably I should be, being the newest person, but he's still marketing this property. He can say it's not marketing, but he's still showing and letting people see it as late as August 12th. And I just have a hard time with that, getting over that.
Well, I took that testimony as being accurate in the, and I don't use Airbnb, so I don't know, and I've never rented from a property that disappeared. It would probably freak me out a little bit, because I think, wait a minute, did I pay for something and now it's gone? And so it did ring, to me, that part of the testimony rang plausible in the saying that, hey, I've rented it 11 times and I've had to open it up to say, someone says, I can't get to it. Well, okay, I'll put it back up there. There it is. You're coming in. To me, like I said, I haven't experienced it to say, oh yeah, that's just how it works, but because it is such an unusual case, but it didn't ring as
malicious.
It didn't ring as, no, it didn't ring. I didn't take it that way. To me, the serious offense is having something placed on your door saying, absolutely stop doing this, and not stopping. And I know he's, like I said, he's not the first to come and say, well, I thought not continuing meant after everything else. Well, we've had, I'm just saying
so you just,
whether you buy it or not is fine. I'm just saying he's not the first one to come here. Now, I'm not saying how we dealt with either of them, but that's how I think he clearly ignored the stop work order to his benefit. He's not the first to do that.
and he won't be the last.
And he won't be the last. But I didn't take that up and down piece.
So
it was an answer that made sense to me, but if it didn't make sense to you, that's fair enough.
Well, and I think that's how this is going, is you either violate the law or you violate a contract.
Yeah.
That's a tough choice, but I'm always going to come down to one side of that equation. I mean, yeah, I've gone 55 in a 50-mile-an-hour speed zone. number of times. I'm not going to go any further than that, but I haven't gotten 75 in a 25 zone. I can promise you that. So I'm going to let someone else make the motion and then go from there.
Was there a motion? I don't recall.
Oh, yeah, we did have one. 11.
I'll make a motion that we, haven't done a short-term rental in a while, that we find the zoning administrator did not err, and the applicant may apply in 11 months for a permit.
Is that from the last rental, or is that from the data application? What, 11 months from when?
I'm open for thought on that. I would
I mean,
say,
it sounds like it's...
Friendly amendment from the last rental?
Well, it sounds like the last rental actually is
think-
longer than the time it was applied, but
I think the last rental is a fair way to do it.
But do we know the last, or does that motion need to be seconded before?
Oh, I guess.
is there a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
I was just going to see if we knew the date of the last rental. I hadn't found it yet.
I would
I
say
may have
the
missed it.
date the advertisement was last removed was on 8/12/19.
Okay.
I would go by that date.
Is that acceptable?
Yes,
For the second? All right, so there's a motion, there's a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you. Good luck.
Even with legal counsel back, we're still getting out quicker.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.org.